Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to the Desi Sportscast Hockey Show. This is a series of programs we're going to kick off with in terms of the Olympics, the big 4 year, well, it's a 5 year gap since the last one event that comes on. And as always, big expectations from the contingent going from our nation. But there's one sport, and I've said it in the first show that we did, that I'm going to be keeping an eye on, and that's obviously the hockey, our national game, what I still consider to be our national game. And there's only one person I'm going to talk about this with, and he was kind enough to come on our first show. And once again, he joins us with his font of knowledge, and it's really great to have him on the show again. Subhashish, welcome to the show. How are you, my friend?
Thank you so much, Bharat. Thanks for having me. Yes, we're all excited with the Indians. The Indian men are definitely medal hopefuls.
Oh wow, big
And
statement to kick off the show.
yes, and what's different this time around, Bharat, is well, we always say that before every Olympics, given the history, but this time I feel we definitely have a chance given the way the team's been playing over the last 3 years. As far as the Indian women are concerned, ranked 10th, the task is really difficult, but I feel they're giant killers and they're in a really difficult group. They haven't had a lot of practice, but believe you me, the other teams are going to look up to the Indian girls with a lot of respect and with some amount of fear as well.
Well, that's really good to hear to kick off the show in terms of expectations and hopes, because I know Rio was 5 years ago, but every time the Olympics comes around, I think there's more expectations around the hockey team than even when we go into a World Cup. This is the medal that we've got rich history in, and one that we are still living on. And I keep using a football analogy no matter what shows we do, but it's a bit like the England team since 1966. We've not brought it home. And whenever there's an international tournament, we think this is the one. And talking about football, it might be the one. And I'm hoping it's going to be the same for our hockey teams. But in terms of the build up to the Olympics, we know it's been very different to previous Olympics, previous tournaments. How has the build up been? And is the interest in the teams, not just the hockey team, but in the Olympics itself, building back home?
Well, Bharat, obviously it's been pretty different to any Olympics that we've had in the past, simply because not everyone was sure that the games were going through. We had the pandemic. Until a couple of months ago, things were looking pretty uncertain. In fact, when the Indian Premier League cricket was on, there was a lot of criticism whether it should actually go ahead or not. And subsequently, the bio bubble was breached, and the IPL had to be suspended or rather postponed. Well, with the Olympic Games, I'll admit wasn't a lot of focus until a fortnight ago. Right now, there's a lot of news on the media, on on the sports news platforms as well about the expectations, the Indians who've qualified, who can expect a medal. A lot of quizzes going on about Olympic history and who's where does India stand in terms of the overall medal tally, etc. And I think we're somewhere at 53rd. Yes, the interest is definitely building, and I'm sure with a few days to go, sometime next week, the interest will be pretty high and definitely would reach a fever pitch by 24th. I'm quite sure.
Well, that's really good to hear that the build up is increasing, and the support is increasing for the team, and interest is being generated, because this year is going to be a very different Olympics. I mean, usually at the Olympics, I know we don't send the bigger support group supporting our teams, but we do have contingents there. But it's going to be very different playing all the sports without crowds. And team sports seems to be the one that has the biggest impact where there's not a crowd. Obviously, athletics when it gets to the latter stages. How do you see that panning out in terms of the players' performance?
Well, Bharat, as far as the hockey teams are concerned, they have gotten used to playing in empty stadiums. For example, the Pro League matches, the Hockey Pro League matches, which were held earlier this year, were all played in empty stadiums. The Indians played Argentina as well. Uh, they have got a bit of a taste as to how it is to play in the empty stadiums. Uh, there are certain teams who like sticking to the game plan and play a very methodical game. Take, for example, Germany. There are teams like India who like to play to the galleries, who somehow get spurred on by the crowds, for better or worse. So I'm sure it will affect some teams, and hence the role of the support staff, the role of the coaches, etc., in sending the message across that the teams have to stick to the game plan to the T, not get too affected by lack of the cheering, etc., in the crowds. And as far as India are concerned, in any case, Graham Reed is a coach who doesn't like too much of doesn't like something too spectacular, not too Bollywood, as he puts it. He likes things done plain and simple. So I think he'll get the message across strong and clear to the boys that maybe just forget the crowds and stick to the game plan. As far as the spectators are concerned, if you're watching on television as well, it's nice to see the crowds. It's, if you're actually watching at home, it's a wonderful experience watching those crowds, etc. That's going to be missing as well. Uh, but hey, we've got to look at the glass half full rather than the glass half empty, which could have been the case had the Olympics not been held. So
Absolutely. Yeah. And in terms of the preparation for the men's and women's team, have you had any insights, anything coming out of the camps going well? We will talk about the squad selection in a minute, but how are the preparations? Have you heard?
the preparations are going on pretty well because well, we've had press conferences with the coaches, Graham Reed and Shod Marine. But with the men, it's they've had tournaments. We played Argentina in the Pro League, etc. But with the women, there has been a definite problem of lack of match practice, and that isn't just to do with the pandemic. It's because the Indian women are not part of the Hockey Pro League like the men are. And so they haven't had a lot of hockey against the top teams, while their group rivals, have had the advantage of having played each other a lot in the Pro League. The Indian girls haven't. So that is something that is bothering the think tank quite a bit. Now, I'm sure they've done the groundwork as far as telling the girls what to do in case there hasn't been match practice, etc. Shard Marine, the coach, has in fact requested the fans and media to keep the expectations low, but I'm sure the girls are up for it as well.
Oh, 100%. And like you said, the progress they've made since Rio has, been incredible. And it's just the lack of international game time, I suppose. Quite rightly, you said at the start, no team's going to take India lightly. That might have been the case 6, 7 years ago. So, in terms of, and I'm going to bring up the two squads that have been selected. One of the big changes is that it's a 16-man squad rather than an 18-man squad for the Olympics. Firstly, do you know the reason why? And secondly, how much of an impact, I know it's only two players, but still two players, will that have on both the squads?
Okay, Bharat, now there has been a change, a very recent change. uh, the Olympics Association has now amended the rules. Now, firstly, let's go back in history. Now, unlike the World Cup and other tournaments which allow 18 players to be selected, the Olympics did allow only 16. However, and this is a change which has happened over the last week. The rules have now been amended, so 18 players will, in fact, make it to the team. This is apart from the reserves.
All
Uh,
right.
so yes, so this is something that's actually happened over the last week, which will it's for football as well as hockey. And so the Internet Olympics Association has actually amended the rules, so there will be 18 in the squad and not 16. For example, Varun Kumar will now make it into the team. Uh, as far as the goalkeepers are concerned, however, there will continue to be only one goalkeeper, but there will be 18 in the squad and not 16. That's a change, a very recent change introduced by the IOA.
Okay, and we'll talk a bit. I wasn't aware of that. We'll talk about that a bit more. But I'm just brought up the Indian women's team when it was 16 that was picked, and I just quickly. I mean, I don't need to run. People can see it, but we've got Savita in goal, then Deep Grace, Nikki, Gurjit, Udita as the defenders, Nisha, Neha, Sushila, Monica, Navjot, and Salima as the midfielders. And then we've got five forwards in Rani, Navnit, Lero, Shyama, Vandana, and Sharmila. Any surprises for you in the Indian women's team?
Well, a couple of surprises, Bharat. Sushila Janu, a very senior midfielder, wasn't actually picked for the World Cup, for the Women's World Cup in 2018. She wasn't picked for the Asian Games as well. And she makes her way back into the team now, which is a good thing. Uh, the other big surprise, and I've actually spoken to the coach about this, is Sharmila being on the verge of becoming an Olympian. She's just 19. She has just 9 international caps behind her, and here she is. And when I spoke to Shad Marine and asked him why, he says she's someone who is fearless. She can surprise the opposition, and she's going to be India's surprise package at the Olympics, or a surprise weapon. I think the forward line is already pretty potent with Rani, Vandana, Navneet, and Lavram Siami, of course, is the live wire, and now we have Sharmila as well, uh, who actually scored a goal in that crucial match against the USA in the Olympic qualifiers. Uh, it was an absolute opportunistic goal, so I'm sure she has what it takes, and a lot of teams could well be surprised with her inclusion. So I would say a couple of surprises. Yes, Sushila Chanu and Sharmila.
And just, I believe I was reading a little bit about Savita. She seems to be in the same mold as Srijas, if you can say even as such a thing, but a standout goalkeeper.
Absolutely, absolutely. In fact, Savita is one of those goalkeepers who has. I don't think there's any Indian women's goalkeeper who comes even close. She's been that consistent over the years, and consistency has been her forte. It's not that, in one match she's there and the next match she isn't that good. When she's in the team, you can be sure that we aren't going to concede any goals. I can think of only just one match. There's just one match in which the Indians have conceded a lot of goals, and that was in the Commonwealth Games against England. We actually won the first match, which was a surprise, and then went on to lose 6-1 in the second game, also because we conceded a few goals in the beginning, and the girls went on an attacking mode and conceded a lot of goals, and Sabita was pretty upset in that match. That match apart, she's been outstanding for the last 3.5 years, and apart from that, since I just mentioned Sharmila, Bharat, I did an interview with Sharmila a couple of days ago, and I asked her which player, which senior player in the side has helped you the most. And this is a question we ask a lot of young players. Not many, most of them just give an answer saying a lot of them, etc. But uh, Sharmila actually said Savita. without a trace of hesitation. Savita's been the one who's been by my side through thick and thin. She's been the one who's actually mentored me and helped me in so many different ways. So I think she brings a lot to the team apart from just her goalkeeping. And absolutely, she's great leadership skills as well.
And before I bring up the men's team, and I just want we're talking about goalkeepers, and obviously I know you said that there's one allowed, but the team can, in theory, pick two goalkeepers. I know there's a
Yes.
reserve goalkeeper, but is there any issues around picking one keeper? Because potentially, certainly for the men's and hopefully for the women's, they'll have more than 5 games. Some of them are back to back. Any issues around or any concerns around that for you?
Well, Bharat, although no names have been taken, I'm sure and I have heard that there are a couple of players, or at least one, who is actually being trained to be a goalkeeper. In case of any major injuries, that particular player will then take on the role of a goalkeeper. I'm sure there's been one or two being trained for it. However, no names have been taken, even though Graham Reed was asked that particular question during the press conference. Uh, that said, I'm sure that will be an issue. Apart from the fact that over the last 3 years, if international hockey, uh, wherever, no matter which tournament, we haven't had a single case where a goalkeeper has actually stood the entire 60 minutes. Ever since Australia came out with the innovation of having a couple of goalkeepers, every team followed suit. And so you had Srigesh doing 15 minutes, and then Krishan Pathak doing 15, and then every quarter, etc. So now you, for the first, after I would say for 4 or 5 years, you now have a goalkeeper who will be there for 60 minutes. And I think, well, no matter how much you train someone, you can't train that person to be as good as a regular goalkeeper. I think that goes without saying. Uh, so I think we just need to hope for the best and hope that in this case, Srijesh can pull through. He has been through a bad injury. That was a couple of years ago. He's recovered well. And when asked about what the possibilities were with regard to an injury to a goalkeeper, Graham Reed just said that Swedish would have to be very seriously injured if we actually were to think of replacing him, etc. And I'm not sure they're actually dwelling on that possibility right now. It would be somewhere at the back of their minds, I guess. But I just wish it doesn't happen because it could be disastrous. I'm
Yeah,
not sure any goalkeeper, however well he's trained, can actually match up to international standards because that's not what his primary role is.
yeah, absolutely. And I've just brought up on screen the selection that was originally made, and you could add to that in terms of the change this week, the players that were changed. You will know these players, very well, and you know the squad. Any surprises for you? I mean, who are the two players that have been added to make up the 18 now?
Well, Bharat, it's been a really a very recent change. I'm just waiting for the official notification. I'm not sure it's come through yet, but what I do know at the moment is that 18 will actually make it. I'm not sure if the two names have actually been released.
Right.
One of them would be Varun Kumar. I'm quite certain. I'm not sure who the second is for the men, as well as the names for the women. For the woman, I'm sorry, there is one name who I do know, and that is Reena Kokar. She
Okay.
is a defender, an attacking defender. Reena will be making it to Tokyo. I'm not sure who the other is.
Well, this might answer a question because we've got an really experienced and formidable backline, but there was from reading the comments once the squad was announced and some of the articles, there was a few surprises in, and the name that keeps being mentioned. There was a couple others, but one name that keeps being mentioned in terms of why he's not in the squad is Akashdeep. Was that a surprise for you?
Really big surprise, Graham, and you said there were no surprises in the women's team and the men's team. I would say some really, really big surprises. Uh, I'm not sure whether to call it a surprise or a shock, but I think it goes with Graham Reed's philosophy. He was asked about Akash Deep. The other two surprises being SV Sunil is not part of the side, pretty experienced striker. Ramandeep Singh, not part of the striker. Now, if you go back to the World Cup, Bharat, just before the World Cup, when the squad was announced again, it was a very young team which was picked at the very last minute. And again, when the team lost to the Netherlands in the quarterfinals, what was said post that was that the team lacked experience. And the team could have done with a bit more experience. And here we are with exactly the same thing happening before the Olympic Games. Now, as far as Akash Deep's selection is concerned, the coach didn't say too much about Akash Deep individually, but when pressed, well, he did say that the players who have been selected are team players. They're ones who like playing for the team. So if you read into that, Akash Deep is a very flamboyant player. He's got brilliant, outrageous skills, but maybe, just maybe, in Graham Reed's view, he isn't. He isn't enough of a team player. Uh, Individual brilliance is something which Graham Reed isn't too fond of. As far as SP Sunil and Ramandeep is concerned, this is what the coach had to say, and I quote: "He said, from where I come from, the exuberance of youth and freshness is something we value a lot." And if you read into that, perhaps that's what he's probably referring to SV Sunil and Ramandeep Singh. Uh, so I don't know. It looks to be a pretty good team, but is it experienced enough to take on the best teams in the world? I'm really not sure. We could have done with a little more experience. So, you know, actually, Graham Reed was asked a question in the press conference saying that the Indians had struggled in the World Cup because of a young team. And Reed's response was that I don't think that's correct at all because I was in the Netherlands bench, uh, the assistant coach of the Netherlands during the World Cup, and I think they did pretty well to lose 1-2 in front of a massive crowd. So, if Graham Reed is saying the right thing, then Harendra Singh shouldn't have gone. I mean, I'm just making
Yeah,
just reading, you know what I mean.
yeah.
So, well, I don't know. I think it's disappointing. I'm not sure if there's more to it than meets the eye. I'm not sure because exactly the same thing happened before the World Cup. Exactly the same thing happens before the Olympics. And, do we have the best team possible in terms of fitness? And if that isn't the case, why don't they tell us that, okay, this particular player isn't fit or is out of form? There are no reasons given. So it's you never really with Hockey India, you never really know what's what's happening because they
It's
refuse to talk about individual players, etc.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. I mean, we hear about the behind the scenes politics and what have you that goes on in Indian sports, but you think a foreign coach might not be would be tough enough not to be influenced by that. But they talk about having that experience and knowing the players around you, certainly in defence, but surely that applies to the forwards. And losing two people who've got vast experience, especially in the Olympics, because that is a different. Would you agree this is a different tournament to any other tournament the hockey players play?
Absolutely. But absolutely, and that is one of the prime reasons why no particular team has dominated the Olympics, because every team comes up with something new. even the minnows have something up their sleeves which they save just for the Olympic Games. You can't take any team lightly. If you look back at the teams that have made it to the podium or the teams that have won gold, there's been no team in modern Olympic history that's actually dominated the Olympics. The best team in the world, the most successful team in the world, Australia, have won just one gold. And I'm sure there are a lot of teams who India have actually done well against in the Pro League, who will come up with something new, something they've saved up just for the Olympics in terms of the short corner conversions, in terms of strategy, etc. So the Olympics are a different ball game. Also, as far as the strikers are concerned, the cohesion and the understanding between the strikers is something that's really important. It was debated hotly during the Commonwealth Games whether the Indian strikers had the understanding. And I spoke to several players post that, including Ramandeep Singh and SV Sunil, who've told me several times that in the entire core group, they are the ones who combine the best. Akashdeep, SV Sunil, Ramandeep, and Mandeep and Lalit. So I'm not so sure if skill is one thing. I'm sure the ones who've made it do have the skill, and I'm not contesting that at all. But have they played enough international hockey together as a unit to have the level of understanding up front which you need against the best teams? I'm not so sure.
And in terms of I mean, we'll see if Akashdeep or SV Sunil, just to name two, get into the extra two places. Will that sort of cheer the fans, as it were, and give us a bit more confidence?
I'm quite certain that that wouldn't be the case.
Really?
Because yes, because SB Sunil hasn't been in favor with the management of the selectors or whoever, the people who in the know, because he's been in and out of the team for quite some time now. In fact, even he was actually sidelined a couple of years ago. He wasn't picked for the Pro League matches against Argentina. He wasn't picked for the tour matches when the team went to Europe as well. So one isn't quite certain why that is the case, but SV Sunil is definitely, I would say he's definitely not in the running to find a spot. As far as Akashdeep is concerned, well, one does hope he makes it, but my gut feeling is it's a definite no.
Wow. Okay. We'll see what happens with that. And big calls from the coach and the selection team. Just as a side, I just thought of that. Who does pick the squad? Is it like cricket? There's a committee, or is it pretty much down to the coach and his staff?
Okay, yeah. So the coach actually. This is to the best of my knowledge, and again, I'm not sure there's a lot of transparency on how exactly this happens. But it did come to the fore during the World Cup selections when there was a lot of controversy. And Harinder Singh said after the World Cup that he didn't get the team he wanted. And by that, what did he mean by that? It just meant that someone else was doing the selection. So they do have a panel of selectors, and they do have an overseer as well from the government. And all this came to the fore because of the controversy which happened during the 2018 World Cup and post that. So it's the selection committee that has the final say. And I was actually speaking with one of an old Olympian, Joachim Cavallo, and he told me as well that it's the selectors who have the final say, but they have no accountability whatsoever. So I'm sure that's ideally not how it's supposed to be, because I'm sure the coach should be given a free hand. That is, I mean, obviously and absolutely not the case as far as Indian hockey is concerned. Even now, with Hockey India, and a lot of changes that have happened over the past few years, but every time there's a tournament where there was a controversy during the Commonwealth Games as well about the squad that was picked. There was a controversy before the World Cup and post the World Cup, and now as well. I'm not certain it's the best team that's been picked, so
That's
I'm sure.
really really sad to hear, but not surprising, unfortunately, when it comes to Indian teams. You hear it in so many different sports. But we have got a squad of 16, potentially 18, that we've got to back 100%. That's been selected. The men in blue will be representing the nation. And I suppose it tells you the stature of Manpreet and his leadership that he's been selected as. I mean, it is a great honour, let's face it, to be one of the flag carriers at the ceremony. Is there anything that you can add to that's been said about Manpreet as a leader, as a player, as the linchpin of that midfield?
You know, a lot of people don't understand what the role of a captain is in hockey. Let's say, as opposed to cricket, where a captain has, a captain is someone has very really important role to play. Now, for example, Manpreet is someone who has the capacity to change the game. He can actually, uh, you know, alter the course of a match single-handedly. Now, we saw that pretty recently as well. We've seen that a number of times. We saw that pretty recently in the Pro League match against Argentina, in which at the very last minute,
Yeah,
single handedly, it was a heroic effort where he actually made his and earned a penalty corner, which was converted. And, you know, it is often said that India is a team which concedes at the death,
yeah,
but, you know, Manpreet actually did something which showed hockey fans around the world that India can score at the death as well. And this was purely, I would say, an individual effort. It was something where it's not just skill. You just need to put everything you have uh, at the last minute. And Manpreet actually did that in the World Cup as well. In the World Cup quarterfinals against Holland, at the very last minute, he actually ran, I would say, 20, 30 yards. It was a heroic run, and we almost earned a penalty corner, but and that was a bit controversial as well, and that's what ended up in Harinder Singh losing his cool. So Manpreet is someone who is extremely inspirational as a captain. You actually have to just have a look at his face when the national anthem is being played. It's each and every time you have see the passion there, and I think he's the best captain we can possibly have. And of course, he has the experience behind him of being an Olympian as well. So a great asset to the side, goes without saying.
absolutely. And I think that's one of the reasons he's been recognised to be the flag carrier, bearer, which is a great honour, like I said. In terms of the formations, and this is again just going back to my football analogy, and we're used to having formations where you know the team plays a 5-3, whatever, two, whatever, 4-2-4. In hockey, it's been mentioned that the Indian team prefer 4-3-3. Did I read that wrong, or how do you see the formations? I know it's very fluid, the game itself.
Well, in the old days, if I can, actually make a comparison, in the old days, India used to play something called the pyramid formation, where you had five forwards. That was a really attacking line with five forwards and three midfielders, two defenders, and that has now changed considerably. In fact, the Australians also used to play the pyramid formation. It's not something you can continue to do now because the game is pretty fast with a lot of counter attacks. So, when you have just two people at the back, it puts a lot of pressure on them. So, you have now a formation where you have four forwards, but this is something which the rest of the hockey world has picked up from European teams like Germany and Holland. And this is the concept of total hockey, which we didn't see a lot before. Now you actually can see the strikers who come up for a counter attack, and a minute or two later, they are the other end of the field doing the defensive work. And Bharat, I'd just like to go back to the point which you mentioned about the squad, something important. And this is what Graham Reed said as well. He said, we've selected players who can actually play across different lines, meaning that if a particular player was to be injured for a particular match, but not injured enough, so you'd actually have to call a reserve. So, you would continue with the same 16 or the same 18. We have selected players who can play different roles. For example, a defender who can actually attack, or a striker who can actually, defend. So, in case, let's say, a player gets injured a match or two into the Olympics, it wouldn't be disastrous because you then would have players who are adept at playing different roles rather than the ones, according to him, who have been kept out, are ones who wouldn't be able to fit into different roles. So this is a point that he made, and I think that's quite an important one as well, because it can be disastrous if, for example, within the first couple of matches you had one or two injuries, and then you have players who not being able to fill up in defense or midfield. It could lead to uh, a lot of could be disaster. So I think that's something that's really important. And with the concept of total hockey, as you said, it's pretty fluid, but we have now four forwards. And the midfield, you have three right now, and a pretty strong defense as well. In fact, both in the men's and women's team, I think we have one of the best defenses
Mm.
in the world. I'm just mentioning that because we didn't in the past. And so, as far as the defense is concerned, I think we're pretty good.
And do you see a lot of you see? I mean, Indian can play more than a lot of the viewers and listeners. Do you see that total hockey?
Well, I do, as far as the Indians are concerned, in stark contrast to, let's say, 4 to 5 years ago. And the players have to be a lot quicker, they have to be a lot fitter, and there is a lot of off the ball play as well, in the sense that also hockey is a game where it's not always what you do when you have the ball, but it's the way you position yourself when you do not have the ball, and take up positions and do your pressing, etc. So that is very important as well. I think now, if you have a look at the way the Indians do their running on the field, I think that's phenomenal. And it is an established fact now that the Indian men are one of the most fittest teams in the world. And I think that is pretty evident in the manner in which they can switch from offense to defense. And you have the defenders like Harmanpreet, etc., coming forward pretty often and taking the attack to the opposition. So, when you have that kind of a formation, it makes it very difficult for opposition teams to, set out a strategy for you on the eve of a match. And I think the Indians have transformed the way they play over the last few years, which I think is pretty amazing.
And the fitness obviously is something that's going to be crucial when you're playing number of games that they are in the tournament. And we said that the Olympics is a very different sort of a tournament to the other World Cups. But it is being recognised that the fitness levels of both the men's and the women's team has risen. Is that down to the influence of the foreign staff?
Absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, the players have said as much. It's definitely been influenced by the foreign staff, especially as far as the Indian girls were concerned. You had a lot of the same players who were in Rio, the senior players, etc. But the players have really improved their fitness with Wayne Lombard coming in from South Africa. He's worked really hard with the girls in terms of their strength, in terms of their fitness, and it is actually a daily routine. The kind of attention which each and every player receives from the support staff, that I think has actually changed the women's game. The skill was there before, the skill continues to be there, but the fitness levels, the strength, stamina, and fitness. And I think from the women's team, the one responsible is Wayne Lombard. I'm not sure he gets enough credit for it. In fact, he isn't spoken about much, but he's done a phenomenal job, and one has just got to speak to any of the girls, and they'll tell you in great detail as to the kind of work he's been doing. So definitely, the foreign support staff have played a great role, and of course, not to mention the players who've worked hard themselves as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Just moving into the formation, and you mentioned that it'll most likely be a 3-3-4, but the fluidity that you mentioned and the total hockey that hopefully we'll see. Any names that will be the first 11 that start? And I know you mentioned in the previous that these with the rotation there'll be players coming in and out. But if there's a formation that you want, whether it's to get a win at the end of a game or start with a few goals at the start, do you have one in mind with the players that's been selected?
Absolutely, Bharat, because as far as I'm going to start up front rather than at the back, because each of the strikers has a particular strength, and Lalit is someone who can make these darting runs, uh, and actually is pretty good with surprising the defenders with his skill. I would definitely have Lalit. Mandeep is the one who does the poaching role pretty well. He's the one who can get into the D at the right time and be, you know, there were those players who I'm not sure how it's maybe an inborn gift to make yourself available at the right place at the right time, and Mandeep is just the man for that particular role. Although he's been out of form, he hasn't scored much recently, but I'm sure on the big stage he'll do pretty well. Uh, then, of course, you have young Shamsher, pretty phenomenal, and Gurjant Singh, who's proven himself many times in the past with his speed and skill. Uh, I'd have my forward line would be definitely these four in the midfield. You cannot, think of an Indian midfield without Manpreet Singh. Young Vivek Sagar has progressed extremely well. In fact, he missed the World Cup because Harinder Singh said that he doesn't actually attack enough. I think since then, he's been doing pretty well with his attacking as well. And you have Neelakanta Sharma. I think he's been very, very calm and solid in midfield. At the back, you have loads of experience. You have Birendra Lakra, cool as ever, really experienced defender. You have the redoubtable Harmanpreet Singh, and again, Harmanpreet brings a lot to the team apart from his defensive skills. He's an outstanding defender, but many a time we see him actually make these forays uh, and get into attacking roles. He's someone who feeds. the strikers pretty well. I think he'll be in my lineup for sure. And I would like to see Varun Kumar as well, although Varun wasn't picked for the first 16. I'm quite sure he'll make it into the 18. And because Varun is a player who's extremely consistent, right from 2017 up to the end of 2018, he's played every single tournament that India had. And India had a very busy season in 2017 and up until the end of 2018. And to actually make it into every squad without being injured and do pretty well was a phenomenal achievement. So I'd like to see Varun start up for India.
While you were giving us that lineup, I brought up a little formation interactive board, putting your team in as best as you described it, with Mandeep Shamshar, Lalit, and Gurjant at the front, Vivek, Manpreet, and Sharma in the midfield, Varun, Harmanpreet, and Lakra at the back. And obviously, there's no question about Srijesh. But in terms of who would be penalty corners, are going to be crucial in this tournament. Rupinder Pal is one of those that seems to be an option. Who would be the options in your team?
Well, definitely. Harmanpreet to start with, definitely. Because, when Rupinder Pal Singh was brought back into the side, it was a comeback. Actually, Rupinder hadn't been doing pretty well in 2018. He was dropped just after the Commonwealth Games. But after that, he's really stuck to the job, and without the glare of the cameras and without the pressure of actually playing the games, he's actually gone through his routines and done well to come back. He did well in the Pro League, which actually makes it tough for the rival teams because now you have Harmanpreet, who is one of the best. You also have Rupinder, and also you have Varun Kumar, and I'm not sure if any of the other sides have you know a three-man a PC battery who are on in form and at their best. I think the Indians, as far as the PCs are concerned, are on top of their game. That said, Bharat, converting PCs hasn't been easy off late for any team. For example, and the best example I can give you is that in 2016, Argentina won the gold purely on the strength of their PCs and purely, by the way, Gonzalo Pia converted those PCs. It was almost as if one man and, through the short corner department, won an Olympic gold for a team. However, since then, we've seen it in numerous tournaments. We've seen it in the Commonwealth Games in Breda, where no team could actually convert the PCs. It was said then that the pitch was too dry, the pitch had to be watered, etc. We saw it again in the World Cup, where teams were struggling with PCs. And a lot of coaches have actually mentioned that the change in rules, which allow the rushers to come out, and attack the short corner takers, and the way they do it now, they've become a lot more daring because the rules allow it, and it's become a lot more difficult to convert the PCs. So we do have the personnel, but then I'm not sure if PCs themselves will actually convert to goals as much as it did in the past. It's not just for India though.
But it is a big element of it, isn't it? In terms of giving an advantage when you know. I mean, you can name the well, you can, not me, but in terms of the PC specialists that other teams have had, that as soon as you know there's a penalty corner, you're pretty much guaranteed a goal. So you're saying the game has evolved a little bit since then.
Absolutely, because Australia had Chris Siriello, and Chris Siriello was one person who, who transformed. I would say post 2010, he was one of the most phenomenal penalty corner specialists, and he was someone who actually could score these big hat tricks in the big finals. For example, he did it against India in the finals of the Commonwealth Games, and on even bigger stage, he did it against the Netherlands in the final of the World Cup. So, you know, when you have a player like Chris Siriello, actually stride up to take that PC, you know, the fans know and the opposition team know that this is there's a 50% chance that that particular shot corner is going into the net.
Hmm.
But right now, and the Netherlands had Van der Weyden. I'm not sure that is the case anymore. PCs aren't as lucrative, I would say, as they were before. I think there has been a balancing act done as far as the rules are concerned to limit how much you can actually do with the PC. That's also got to do with the way the Russians have actually managed to increase the bravado factor, because it can be risky if you actually look at the way they rush
Yeah,
forward.
I don't know how they're brave enough to do it sometimes.
Absolutely. In fact, I was speaking to Amit Rohidas once, and he does it pretty often for India. And I asked him, "How do you do it?" And he says, "Yes, it does hurt. Of course, it hurts. And he actually told me that he takes the blows on his arms, etc. And you've got to go and lie down with the ice packs,
Yeah.
etc. to get rid of the pain. So I'm not sure if people could actually envisage that this could be done. And knowing that this now can be done, perhaps the rules will be altered again to balance the scales. But as far as the Olympics are concerned, going into the Olympics, I'm not sure PCs will play as big a role as they did in Rio. I'm certain of that, because short corners actually won a team an Olympic gold. So I'm not sure it's going to be that's going to be the case this time around.
And in a way, that helps our team because we're more open play goals. We weren't renowned for the PCs, but
Absolutely.
also maybe I know they. It's. I'm glad you brought that up because even with all the protection, to run up against a ball that's going to be fired at God knows what speed at close range, it takes some bravery. So
Absolutely.
just moving to the schedule, and we'll start with the women. I mean, you couldn't get it tougher for the women in terms of the first few games. They've got Holland, Germany, and Britain as their first three games. Would you be looking for India to finish third, ideally? Obviously, we want fourth to move to the next stage, but then you're going to meet one of the top seeds, possibly or most likely in the next in the knockout stages. Are we looking at third, and how do you see that group developing?
Well, Bharat, I wouldn't take the names of Netherlands, Germany, and Great Britain together. I would just say Netherlands to start with, because Netherlands have been just phenomenal over the years. No team has dominated women's hockey the way the Dutch have done ever since Max Caldas took over the team. And well, the first match is against the Netherlands. However, the girls now know that's coming because the Olympics has been postponed, and we've actually been talking about this for quite some time now. Uh, I think you know if the girls do begin well against Netherlands, and I would say keep the margin down, not lose by too many goals. I think that should be a pretty good start to the Olympics. Not expecting too much because we haven't played the Netherlands as well for a while. As far as Germany and Great Britain are concerned, Germany is a pretty strong side as well. The Indians, the girls didn't do too well against Germany. But apart from these two teams, I think we can do well against the others. For Great Britain, for example, I think we've done extremely well against Great Britain. We did pretty well in the Women's World Cup. The opener, the Women's World Cup in London in 2018, and we were playing, the Indian girls were playing England, and in the host nation with all the support, and we almost beat England. The match was drawn, but I think we did pretty well. So Great Britain haven't been doing that well of late. So, well, it's a case where, apart from Netherlands and Germany, I think the Indians will need to win all their matches. If we can somehow make that, I would say, a Herculean effort to somehow split points with Germany, that would be an added advantage. However, don't forget that Ireland, when Ireland went into the Women's World Cup in 2018, there were not many who had expected the Irish girls to make it to the finals. In fact, Ireland were not a fancied side at all, and they made it to the finals of the Women's World Cup. So I think the Indians have a pretty good chance because, as far as women's hockey is concerned, Ireland have shown that it can be pretty open. The Indians have done well against Ireland as well in their practice matches, which they had in Spain. So I think, as far as the capability to win is concerned, the Indian girls do have it in them. What's been lacking is the match practice, and they haven't had any match practice against the top teams, especially in a very competitive, environment. How much that will affect the team remains to be seen. A quarterfinal is very much on the cards, I would say, and I think think tank is, we'll look at the positive side to say that we wouldn't meet Netherlands in the quarterfinals because Netherlands
Mm.
is in the same group. So if we do make it to the knockouts, I think whoever we meet from the other end, we've done again well against Australia in the Commonwealth Games. We almost beat Australia in the Commonwealth Games. We did pretty well. So you could fancy your chances from then on. Needless to say, the task is difficult.
100%. Yeah, like you said, especially with the lack of international game time. But from what you're saying, I don't know if you agree with me. A third place would be incredible in that group.
Absolutely,
Um,
absolutely,
Moving into the knockout stages, we'll probably play either. I mean, the other group has got Argentina, Australia, China, Japan, New Zealand, and Spain. And from what you're saying, apart from Argentina, who'll probably be first or second in that group, we've got really nothing to fear as such. If we were to face one of the other teams in the quarterfinals.
absolutely. I think we've got nothing to fear, and I think the pressure will be on the other team because they know that they'll be up against a very good side. The expectations to win will be on them, not on the Indians. It was the same at the World Cup, and I think if we actually make it into the knockouts, we can surprise quite a few teams at the Olympics. But of course, the big challenge is actually making it to
Mm.
the quarterfinals, given that the group is quite tough.
Yeah, absolutely. But real hopes that you've given us there, and I know you said let's keep the expectations low, but there's quite a bit of hope there as well. So that's really good to hear. I've just brought up the men's schedule, and one of the things that's been held against the national team is that they're slow starters in tournaments. Do you think that's fair? and how do you see? Because our first two games, or you think, we've got New Zealand first, unless from the outset say there's no easy game in hockey really. We've got New Zealand first, and then Australia. We should be picking up points from both, would you say? But that first point about slow starters.
Absolutely, about the first game has always been tricky. It began, from recent memory. I can tell you the game against Pakistan in the Commonwealth Games, where we were leading 2-1 until the very last minute, and Pakistan equalized from a penalty corner, and we went on to do pretty badly in the Commonwealth Games. What the coach then had to say was that it was the first game that changed everything. So the first game can be tricky, and apart from what you said, I think it's the two back-to-back games against New Zealand and Australia, uh, which will be tough. Uh, Apart from the weather factor, because Tokyo will be warm. Now, of course, it is warm in India as well, but it will be a test of fitness. I feel the first two games will be extremely crucial. If we have a bad day at the office in the first two games, I think it's going to be pretty tough. But if we do well in the first two games, we are pretty much, that's, I would say, that's half the job
Mm.
done. We do have back-to-back games against Argentina and Spain as well, but I wouldn't say that that would be as tough, uh, especially since New Zealand have been a tricky side. New Zealand are one of those teams who, well, obviously they're not ranked as high as India, but they've surprised the best teams from time to time, and they do it at crucial
Mm.
junctures. They did it to India in the Commonwealth Games
Mm.
after having lost to India in the Four Nations, etc., which weren't tournaments as important as the Commonwealth Games. Um, I think New Zealand will be pretty tricky up front. As far as Australia are concerned, Bharat, an India-Australia match, whenever India played Australia, I would say up until 2016, no one would be surprised as to who the favourites were.
Mm.
And that would always be Australia. In fact,
Yeah,
Australia would be the favourites against pretty much any side. But since 2016, I think that has changed. We got closer and closer to Australia, so much so that the Australians haven't beaten India comprehensively in a single match since 2017, 2016. So that's a match which can go either way. And also from a fan point of view, I think that will be a match to watch out for if you're a
yeah,
hockey fan
absolutely.
on the 25th. I think that's Sunday,
It
and
is.
that will be a super Sunday for hockey with India Australia. Uh, as far as the result from that particular match, we need a full points against New Zealand. That goes without saying. Against Australia, I would say a draw would be pretty good. If we can win, that would be an absolute bonus. In fact, if we won the first two matches, I would say we're halfway there. So the pressure wouldn't be as much in the Argentina and Spain matches.
Would you hold any thoughts to, we took part in the test event last year in Tokyo, and although we didn't have the best first games against New Zealand, we beat them quite comfortably 5-0 in the final. Do you hold, or does everything go out of the window when you're playing any team in the Olympics?
Well, Bharat, as far as New Zealand is concerned, we win one and lose one, and that's been happening for quite a while. We actually did lose to New Zealand as well in the Tokyo Test event, and then in the finals, of course, we did beat them comprehensively. But if you actually go back, in the beginning of 2018, we were playing a tournament against Belgium and New Zealand. It was a 14 tournament. We beat New Zealand comprehensively in that particular tournament. When the boys went on to play New Zealand in the semi-finals of the Commonwealth Games, a lot of players told me post the loss that they were pretty confident that they would actually win that game, given the previous history of playing New Zealand. We didn't, and there was a lot that happened post the Commonwealth Games with the change of coaches, etc. and it was all due to that one particular match against New Zealand. Uh, so I wouldn't put actually too much into the win in the Tokyo Test event, because I don't feel that was a major tournament. Uh, New Zealand have actually played Australia in the in the Pro League recently, and I think the Indians would be taking New Zealand. Have a lot of respect for New Zealand. Uh, I would put New Zealand just on par with Australia right now,
Really.
because absolutely.
Well, as you say, it's going to be a tricky start. Let's not say a tough start. Tricky start against New Zealand. Then obviously, hopefully, that'll set us up for the big game against the Aussies on that Sunday, and then hopefully the result on the back of that will make the rest of the games against Argentina, Japan, and Spain. Hopefully, we can relax a little bit if we get a good start, and that's what I'm looking for. Just going back to the what you said about the Netherlands being such far away from the other teams. In the other group, we've got Belgium, Canada, Germany, Britain, Netherlands, and South Africa. Any teams that Belgium are number two at the moment, and Netherlands are number three. Teams that we should obviously take seriously, but how big a difference is it between us and them?
Well, Bharat, I would say, apart from, are you referring to the women?
Sorry, the men, because you said in the women's, the Netherlands are far away, the best team by a
Absolutely.
long way. But in the men's, is the gap between any of those teams and us such?
Not really. Bharat, in fact, if I could just go back to the group stage, and why I said New Zealand will be crucial is that I don't see Argentina and Spain being such difficult contenders if we're not under pressure. I think if under normal circumstances, I don't see Argentina being such a great threat to the Indians. Of course, in the Pro League match, they did pretty well against us, but I would say India are presently a better team than Argentina, and definitely a better team than Spain as well. So, if we were to do well in the first two matches with no pressure, I think we should be able to put it across Argentina and Spain pretty easily.
Yeah,
However, playing under pressure against these two teams would change the equation. Now, going into the other group, the only side we have to be wary of course, is Belgium, and that goes without saying, because Belgium are a dangerous side. I think we did extremely well to draw against Belgium in the World Cup in the first match. I think that was a phenomenal effort. Not too many people give India credit for having done that, uh, but I think that was a great result. We've done well against Belgium in the Hockey Pro League, which was played last year. Having said that, again, Belgium is a team who bring out their best in the best tournaments and know how to change the gears, as it were, as you go through the league phase into the knockouts, etc. So, because again, if you look, in 2018, in the Champions Trophy, the Belgians, I think they finished second last. It was Australia who won the gold, followed by India, Netherlands who won the bronze. It was the same team. They did pretty badly. And then you come to the World Cup, and Belgium are the world champions, all happening within the space of 6 months. So I think they're pretty smart with their knowledge of how to play which team. I'm not sure they actually step up to the top gear against in matches that are not so important, or in tournaments that are not so important. I don't believe that the Indians would actually have to play the Belgians in the quarters if they do pretty well. I think if even if you were to finish first or second in the group, I'm not sure we should run into Belgium, unless, of course, there are surprises in the other group as well. I would say, I would want to avoid Belgium. Any of the other countries should be okay. Although Bharat, I should mention Germany for the simple reason that Germany hadn't been doing too well in the recent past, but have made a resurgence of sort over the last few months, which makes them a dangerous side. In the Hockey Pro League, the Germans were in the bottom half, and all of a sudden, won quite a few matches on the trot. They're now in the top half of the Pro League rankings. So Germans are doing pretty well. Uh, but I think the Indians are still a better team than Germany at the moment. I think we're ranked fourth in the world, and that says it all.
Yeah.
And something that Graham Reed mentioned in the press conference is that India have beaten 11 of the 12 teams in the Olympic who are going to play the Olympics in the past 2 years. So that says a lot. The team we haven't beaten is Canada. And of course, I think we're a better team than Canada. So,
Yes.
I mean, technically, on paper, I think, we do have it, in us to actually make it to the podium. Uh, it does depend, however, on factors like maybe how the team acclimatizes to Tokyo, etc., and hence, again, the importance of the first two matches.
Yeah, absolutely. Subhashish, I can talk to you about hockey till midnight and carry on after that as well. And it's one of my favourite topics to talk about is our national team and the sport. And the main thing for me is that 40 years of hurt might actually change this year, and we might be on the podium because once you get into the semi-finals, you don't know. And with a top four nation, I can't remember the last time we've ever. Well, I don't think we have been that for a long, long time. So potential semi-final, but then in a one-off game, you don't know what's going to happen. But absolutely fantastic insight into the team selection, the formation, and our chances in both the men's and women's, and a lot of hope going into it. Let's keep the expectations, on the level, and but keep the support. Absolutely fantastic speaking to you as always, my friend. And I'm not going to make you do a prediction. I think you've said we've got a good chance of a medal podium in the men's. Is that fair? And a quarter final at least in the women's.
Absolutely. I think with the team that we have now, I'm talking about the men, with the team that we have now, with the kind of record that we have had over the last 2 years, I think it would be pretty disappointing if the Indians were to come away without a medal. I would say that because putting history apart, this team has been doing pretty well. It's not an opportunity I think we should let go of. If all goes well, if everything goes according to plan, I think the Indians should be on the podium. You know, in the past, one had to phrase it and say, well, the Indians would actually have to raise their game to actually be in the podium. I wouldn't say that. I think we do have it. If the Indians go ahead and just play like they've been doing over the last couple of years without losing their nerve in the knockout games, that's something we missed. I think we can actually find a place in the top three.
Fantastic. That is music to my ears, and I think this time is more than any time since 1980, possibly. Apart from the LA Olympics, it's a definite possibility. So, once again, thank you for your time, Subhashish. Really enjoyed speaking to you, and I'm sure we'll catch up again as the tournament progresses. And wish all the boys and all the other athletes. We're going to do a preview show for the other sports that we're in next week, hopefully. But we wish them well, and the nation is supporting you. But for today, Subhashish, thank you so much. Really appreciate you taking time out.
Thank you so much, Bharat, and hope England have a great evening ahead as well. So
Absolutely. It's going to be a long night, one way or the other. Thank you, my friend. You stay safe and speak to you soon.
Thank you so much, Bharat.